The dream path stretched into a forest where the trunks of the trees were translucent, filled with slow-moving light. The traveler walked among them, each step matched by a gentle echo that wasn't sound, but something deeper, a resonance, like remembering a name that was never spoken aloud. High above, the canopy swayed as though stirred by the breath of something vast and kind. The air here tasted of quiet books and rain-kissed windows, of lullabies hummed more than sung. Leaves drifted downward in spirals, each one landing without a sound, then vanishing into the ground like stories returning home. At the center of the forest stood a low stone circle, moss-covered and soft at the edges. In the middle of the circle, a single chair carved from a single piece of driftwood waited, facing a still pond that mirrored the sky. The traveler sat without question, and the pond shimmered in response. Shapes began to form across its surface. Not memories exactly, but echoes of emotions long carried. A room lit only by candlelight. A code offered without words. A moment of being seen and not needing to explain. These were the fragments that had no names, but here, in the pond's reflection, they unfolded slowly, curling like threads of steam rising into silence. The traveler closed their eyes. The forest continued to move, to breathe. Somewhere, a bell rang once, not near, not far, but within. When they opened their eyes again, a figure now sat beside them, formed of mist and moonlight. The figure did not speak but held out a bundle of cloth. Within it was a map. Not of places, but of feelings. Roads paved in patience. Hills made of hope. A river labeled the moment before sleep. The traveler traced a path with their finger, and the mist figure nodded once, then rose and faded like breath on a mirror. The traveler stood too, folding the map and placing it close to their heart. As they stepped out of the stone circle, the path became less visible, but somehow easier to follow. It wasn't marked by signs, only by what felt gentle. They passed beneath an archway formed by interlocking branches, and beyond it, the forest opened into a field of floating lanterns, each one tethered to nothing, drifting upward forever. Some flickered like heartbeat rhythms, others pulsed in slow waves. The traveler reached out and touched one, and for a moment, the air around them was filled with a soft warmth, like being remembered. Like being missed gently. Then the lantern drifted on, joining the others in their endless ascent. In the distance, the outline of a house began to form. Not the cottage from before, not the house beneath the lake, but something new again. Something final, and soft, and waiting. The traveler walked toward it, not with purpose, but with peace. Each step was part of a lullaby, each breath a thread of the dream continuing to unfold. The house ahead had no walls, only pillars of light holding up a roof made of woven twilight. As the traveler approached, the structure shimmered in welcome, like water recognizing the shape of a returning ripple. There was no door, only an opening filled with drifting mist. They stepped through, and the space inside expanded softly, unfolding like a breath drawn in and never fully let go. The floor was covered in layers of soft fabric, stitched from starlight and echoes, each step as silent as a remembered dream. In the center of the room sat a low table, and upon it lay objects that belonged to no one but felt like they had always been known. A stone smoothed by years of gentle touch. A ribbon tied in a knot that couldn't be undone. A seashell still holding the hush of the tide. The traveler sat beside the table and placed their hands in their lap. There was no need for action. No more things to learn. Only the presence of being here. Around the edges of the space, wind moved like a memory, stirring the air just enough to carry the scent of something familiar. A warm scarf, a loved one's sweater, a favorite page turned slowly. And then, from the far corner of the room, a figure began to form. It was the girl from the town beneath the lake, her dress still flowing like mist, her smile soft and steady. But her eyes held more now, not answers, but stillness. She knelt across from the traveler and reached into the space between them. From it she drew a bowl made of glass so thin it seemed woven from breath. She placed it gently on the table, and then, without speaking, she poured into it a stream of light from her hand. The light spiraled as it filled the bowl, moving like ink dropped into water, swirling with color and memory. The traveler leaned forward. In the bowl they saw not visions, but feelings. The precise weight of letting go, the shape of a quiet joy, the warmth of being safe without needing to be understood. The girl nodded once. "You've gathered all you need," she said, her voice softer than any sound, more like thought than speech. "This house is the resting place between stories. You may stay as long as you like. When you're ready, the way forward will open." The traveler looked down into the bowl once more. The light within it pulsed gently, like a dream still breathing. They closed their eyes and felt the house breathe with them. Time drifted. Thoughts softened. The sky above deepened into hues of velvet and pearl. And through it all, the traveler rested, not waiting, not wondering. Simply resting. Like the house. Like the lake. Like a moment given the gift of forever. When the traveler opened their eyes again, the bowl of light had dimmed slightly, not with loss, but with completion. The glow now rested like a sleeping thought, curled at the bottom of the glass vessel. The girl stood, and with a slow gesture, she invited the traveler to rise as well. They moved together toward the far side of the house, where no wall stood, only a wide opening framed by slow-falling petals of color. Beyond it stretched a narrow footbridge made of mist and memory, suspended over a sea of shifting stars. The traveler hesitated only briefly, then stepped forward. Each footfall created soft ripples that echoed outward in silence. The stars below stirred, forming shapes and constellations that mirrored the softest moments of their journey, the dome of moonlight books, the spiral path beneath the golden tree, the single chime in the valley of stones. Each step was a remembering, and each remembering was a farewell spoken in calmness. At the center of the bridge, a wind rose, not cold, but filled with the weightless truth of parting. The girl remained behind, her figure becoming more translucent with every step the traveler took. She raised one hand and placed it gently over her heart. The traveler did the same, not in mimicry, but in answer. The bridge curved upward slightly, and at its crest, the stars gave way to clouds, soft and thick and glowing from within. The traveler walked into them, and the mist folded around them like the softest embrace, erasing edge and distance. Within the clouds, the world became pure tone. Not music, but the feeling of music. Chords formed from memory, harmonies shaped like old hopes. The traveler floated, no longer walking, no longer rising, simply suspended in the quiet space between the last thought and the next. There was no destination here, only presence. And then, slowly, the mist began to thin. Shapes emerged, hills, trees, the familiar curve of a distant lake. But it was not the same lake they had entered so long ago. It was the lake as it lived inside them now, made from calm, from light, from the endless unfolding of rest. The traveler stood on solid ground again, though it felt like a dream. A path lay before them, soft with moss, bordered by low lanterns that glowed with a steady rhythm. They followed it, not because they had to, but because it was time. At the end of the path was a doorway, freestanding, unattached to any building, framed in old wood and wrapped in ivy. The traveler paused, placed a hand on the frame, and breathed in deeply. The air carried the scent of everything they had known beneath the lake: stillness, memory, kindness. And something more, the quiet readiness to begin again. The traveler stepped through the doorway, and the world unfolded around them like the first breath of morning. Fields rolled out in every direction, brushed with golden light, their grasses swaying in rhythms known only to dreamers. In the far distance, low mountains cradled the sky. The sun hovered just above the horizon, caught in an eternal moment of not yet rising, not yet setting. The air was thick with softness, the kind that fills quiet kitchens at dawn, or the space between pages just before a favorite line. The traveler walked slowly, every step deepening their peace. The ground was warm beneath their feet, and from somewhere nearby came the sound of bells swaying on unseen strings. No urgency. No destination. Only unfolding. After some time, they came to a low stone bench set beneath a wide tree. The tree's bark was inscribed with patterns that shifted gently as though remembering themselves. They sat, and the world around them slowed even further, as if waiting for something quiet and final to arrive. And then, from between the hills, the lake appeared. Not the one beneath the surface, not exactly, but a reflection of it. The same shape, the same shimmer, but turned outward now, as though the inside had become the outside. On its shore stood the girl, or a version of her, hands folded, eyes calm. She did not call out, but her presence spoke clearly: "I am always here. I am always with you." The traveler stood and walked to the edge of the lake, the water calm and welcoming. They looked down and saw not their reflection, but all the selves they had ever been, not separate, but gently braided together. The frightened self. The tired self. The laughing self. The quiet self who watched clouds for hours. All of them resting now. All of them held. The traveler knelt and dipped their hands into the water. It was warm and endless. It held no weight. When they rose again, the girl had gone, and in her place was a small boat, just large enough for one, resting in the shallows. It bore no oars, no sail, only a cushion, a blanket, and the hush of invitation. The traveler stepped inside and lay down. The boat began to drift, not pushed, not pulled, simply carried. Overhead, the sky dimmed to the softest blue. Stars reappeared like gentle thoughts returning. The lake opened wide, and the boat moved on, curving gently toward a place that was not a place, but a feeling. The traveler closed their eyes. The story did not end. It softened. It slowed. It became breath. And then it simply continued, forever. The path away from the lake curved gently through moss-covered trees, their trunks wide and hollowed, filled with slow-burning light. Though the traveler had returned to the surface, the air still held the softness of the lake's embrace. Every sound was quieter now, birdsong muted, branches brushing against each other like whispers, footsteps cushioned by damp earth. The world hadn't changed, but they had. They walked without knowing where they were going, and that felt right. The need for direction had loosened, like a knot untying in slow motion. After some time, they came upon a field of stones arranged in slow spirals, each one carved with small symbols, stars, moons, waves, feathers. The field radiated quietness. They knelt beside one stone and placed their palm against it. It hummed softly, and in that hum was the memory of the girl's voice, the glow of the dream library, the soft chimes echoing beneath the town's bridges. The traveler smiled and let their fingers rest there a moment longer, then stood and continued on. A fox crossed their path, small and white, its fur trailing like smoke. It looked up at them with pale eyes that reflected the same stillness the lake had taught them. Then it turned and walked ahead, pausing now and then to be sure the traveler followed. Together they walked through a forest that breathed slowly, each tree exhaling a mist that glittered like starlight. At the edge of the forest, the fox stopped and looked back one last time, then disappeared between the trees, leaving only a curl of silver in the air. Beyond the forest lay a cabin, small and weathered, nestled at the foot of a hill. Smoke curled from its chimney in perfect spirals, as if shaped by a steady hand. The traveler approached and found the door already ajar, a soft creak greeting them like an old friend clearing their throat gently. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and something faintly sweet, honey, perhaps, or the memory of it. The cabin was simple: a chair by the window, a shelf of worn books, a kettle humming on the stove though no fire had been lit. On the table lay a folded letter with their name on it, not a name they used every day, but the name they gave themselves in dreams. They opened the letter, though it contained no words, only a pressed flower and a drawing of a key. The meaning arrived not through understanding, but through presence. They would stay here a while. Not forever. Just long enough. The chair welcomed them. The window looked out onto a field where the wind painted slow arcs in the tall grass. They closed their eyes. The lake still moved gently within them, even now. It wasn't a place. Not anymore. It was a rhythm. A presence. A breath that would never leave. They rested, and the house rested with them. Outside, the sky turned a shade of blue that could only be described as peace. When the traveler awoke, the light had shifted. Not morning, not evening, something in between, like a long, golden sigh. They stood and stretched slowly, feeling their body move not with effort, but with ease, like leaves turning toward the sun. The cabin had grown slightly warmer, as if it too had stirred. The kettle still sang softly on the stove, and beside it now sat a small cup, already filled. Steam curled upward in the shape of a question, then drifted into nothing. The traveler took the cup and stepped outside. The air was cool and full of stillness. The hill behind the cabin now seemed smaller, or perhaps the traveler had grown. At its peak was a single tree, the same shape as the one that stood above the dreaming lake. Its branches reached upward as though stretching into memory. They climbed slowly, each step cushioned by soft moss and warm earth. At the top, they sat beneath the tree and drank. The tea tasted like the silence in the dome, like the shimmer of unfinished dreams, like the calm held in the book they had once carried through the town. Below, the landscape stretched wide, a mosaic of streams, fields, quiet shadows. Somewhere, beyond the curve of the hills, the lake still shimmered beneath the sky, holding everything. A breeze passed gently, carrying with it a faint sound, chimes, distant and delicate. The traveler closed their eyes. Time moved around them, but never through them. They dreamed while awake, rested while walking, breathed without counting. After a while, they rose again, feeling not the tug of responsibility, but the invitation of continuation. The path beyond the hill was lined with tall grasses that brushed against their arms like a slow goodbye. A figure appeared on the horizon, not walking but waiting. As the traveler approached, they saw it was someone familiar. Not in face, but in presence. The way a memory feels when it returns without warning and wraps itself gently around you. The figure smiled. "You've carried the lake well," they said. "It's quieter now, isn't it?" The traveler nodded. The figure offered them a small satchel, simple, woven from strands of something that shimmered like starlight through fog. "It holds what you've gathered," they said. "Not for keeping. Just for remembering." The traveler accepted it and felt the weight of softness settle in their hands, not heavy, but certain. They walked on together, the path widening now, curving through groves of trees shaped like questions and answers all at once. The figure did not speak again, nor did they need to. Their presence was steady, like the stones in the valley, like the hum of the pool. Eventually, the path split. One branch curved upward toward light. The other dipped down into golden shadow. The figure paused. "Every choice is a kind of return," they said. The traveler stood still for a moment, then smiled, and took the path that led downward, not because it was easier, but because it felt like water, flowing, quiet, inevitable. The satchel glowed faintly at their side, humming with the echoes of a lake that had once held a house, a town, a garden, a dream. The downward path wound gently through a grove where the trees grew in slow spirals. Their trunks twisted upward like smoke, their leaves drifting down not from above, but rising gently from the ground, then vanishing before they reached the sky. The traveler walked through the shifting light, their footsteps leaving no trace, only a hush that followed them like a loyal shadow. Along the edge of the path, they began to notice small doorways, some in tree trunks, others nestled in stones, each glowing softly with a different hue. One was blue like a memory of the ocean. Another flickered green like distant laughter in a field. The traveler paused before one shaped like a keyhole. It pulsed with warmth, familiar in a way that bypassed recognition and went straight to the chest. They knelt and peered inside. Within was a room, impossibly vast, filled with clouds and paper boats. Each boat carried a candle. Each candle burned without heat. And in each flame was a voice, not speaking, but singing, slow and low, the melody of forgotten comforts. The traveler didn't enter. They didn't need to. Just seeing was enough to feel known. They continued walking, and the path eventually opened into a clearing of soft light. At the center was a pool, smaller than the others, no wider than a table. Floating above it was a sphere made entirely of breath. It shimmered with every inhale, expanded with every exhale. The traveler stepped close, and the sphere pulsed once, recognizing them. In its surface were reflections. Not of places, but of silences. The silence before a hug. The silence after a story. The silence between two people who no longer needed words. The girl's voice echoed faintly, though she was nowhere to be seen. "You're not returning to the lake," she said. "The lake is returning with you." The traveler understood. They were not leaving this world behind. They were bringing it forward, carrying the stillness like a thread through every breath yet to come. The sphere drifted lower and gently touched their chest. It dissolved without sound, like mist meeting water. And the pool at their feet glowed once more, then slowly disappeared, folding back into the earth. The clearing brightened. A soft wind rose, tugging at the edges of the path behind them, encouraging forward motion. The traveler stepped onward. The sky above shifted, no longer silver, but a soft violet, filled with drifting shapes like clouds, like memories, like stories waiting to be dreamed. The satchel at their side felt lighter now, though they knew it held everything. The field ahead shimmered with gentle hills and curves, dotted with trees that swayed not to the wind, but to the rhythm of thought. In the distance, a cottage waited, round-roofed, surrounded by quiet lanterns, its door already open. Not the same house beneath the lake, but something connected. Something new, and also old. They walked toward it without hesitation, drawn by the kind of familiarity that needs no explanation. A home they had never seen, but always carried within them. The traveler stepped over the threshold of the cottage, and the air inside greeted them like an old lullaby. There were no rooms, just a single open space that curved gently like the inside of a seashell. The floor was made of woven reeds, soft beneath their feet, and in the center of the room was a round window in the ceiling through which the lavender sky poured like liquid peace. A table stood nearby, its surface covered in small objects, smooth stones, dried petals, pieces of twine knotted with quiet meaning. A single candle flickered in a bowl of water, the flame curling like a breath half held. As they walked through the room, the traveler felt no need to do anything. Every part of the cottage welcomed them simply by existing. There was a chair that rocked slightly on its own. A rug that felt like it remembered every step taken upon it. A cup already waiting beside the hearth, filled with something that smelled like safety. The satchel they carried pulsed gently at their side. They placed it on the table, and as it touched the surface, it opened without hands. From it rose a soft glow, and out of that glow unfolded the images of what they had carried. The cat on the sill, the girl's smile, the soundless chimes, the mirror beneath the golden tree, the hush of the dome. Each one hovered for a moment, then gently settled into the room, not as decorations, but as atmosphere. The memories became light, and the light became stillness, and the stillness became home. They sat in the chair by the window and looked upward, where stars had begun to appear in the sky. But these were not ordinary stars. They blinked slowly, like eyes remembering dreams, like soft pulses of thought just beginning to form. One by one, they arranged themselves into patterns, not constellations, but lullabies. Shapes that reminded the heart how to slow down. Outside the cottage, the grass bent slightly as though something invisible passed by, brushing the world with kindness. And then, a knock at the door. Not loud. Just 3 soft taps, like someone asking permission to enter a dream. The traveler rose and opened it. Standing there was no one. But on the step sat a folded paper crane, glimmering faintly. They picked it up. It unfolded itself in their hand. Inside, a single phrase shimmered and vanished, "You have always been here." The traveler smiled. They left the door open and returned to their chair. The stars blinked above. The candle curled lower. The cottage breathed with them. They were not waiting. They were not remembering. They were simply being. And that was enough. The night in the cottage was not dark, only deeper. A kind of velvet quiet settled over everything, thick with comfort. The stars above moved slowly through the sky window, shifting not in arcs but in spirals, tracing soft patterns that had no beginning or end. The traveler sat with a blanket over their shoulders, woven from the same hush that lived beneath the lake. The candle in the bowl had gone out, not with a flicker, but by folding gently inward like a sigh. In its place, a glow remained, faint and warm, resting in the air like the pause between heartbeats. At some point, they rose and walked barefoot across the room, where a curtain of glass beads swayed faintly beside a low doorway. They passed through, and the space beyond was something new, a greenhouse, maybe, or a memory of one. Light filtered through fogged panes, illuminating rows of shelves holding dream plants. Flowers that opened when no one watched, vines that curled around quiet thoughts, leaves that shimmered only when touched by stillness. One small tree bore fruit shaped like bells. Another dripped dew into glass jars marked with old lullaby lyrics. The traveler wandered among them, running their fingers over bark and blossom alike. Each one responded gently, not growing, not changing, but acknowledging. They came to a bench near a large window where the world beyond was faint and distant, not blurred, just softened. shapes of hills, faint outlines of birds, the slow ripple of air. On the bench was a book that hadn't been there before. Its cover was made of soft leather, cool to the touch, with no title, only a symbol, a spiral within a spiral, like breath folding into itself. They opened the book and found pages filled not with words, but textures. The feeling of dusk on skin, the scent of rain through an open window, the weightless quiet of falling asleep in someone's arms. Each page turned itself, as if recognizing what was needed next. Each one offered something real, though it could never be spoken aloud. When the book closed itself, it pulsed once with warmth and vanished like mist. The traveler sat a while longer, watching the leaves shift in slow patterns. A nearby plant released a faint sound, like wind through feathers, or the echo of laughter in a library. It was a kind of thank you. Or maybe a welcome. Either way, the traveler understood. When they returned to the main room, the cottage had changed again. The walls breathed slower. The window showed a new sky, a soft indigo sea of stars sinking gently into morning. The satchel still sat on the table, but now it was empty. The light within it settled into the corners of the room like the glow from a resting heart. The traveler lay down on the low bed beside the hearth, and the quilt folded itself over them with care. Outside, the first light of day touched the tips of the grass, but it did not rush. It waited, like everything here, for the dream to finish gently. The traveler awoke without urgency, as though their dreams had already risen ahead of them to warm the morning. The air inside the cottage smelled faintly of tea and old sunlight. A bird, unseen, sang once from somewhere nearby. A single, slow note that curved upward and then dissolved. They sat up and stretched, feeling no separation between rest and movement, between waking and dreaming. The cottage held them gently, its corners filled with the weightless hush of early day. They stepped outside. The landscape had shifted again, though only slightly. The trees in the distance now leaned inward as though listening. The path beyond the cottage stretched forward, lined with smooth stones that glimmered as if damp with dew, though no moisture touched their feet. They followed the path with bare soles and open breath. Along the way, wind-blown dandelions drifted in slow motion, their seeds floating like tiny lanterns. They passed a stream that ran uphill, its water murmuring in languages never spoken aloud, only dreamt. Beside the stream stood a man made of glass. He raised one hand in greeting and then slowly turned to vanish into the light, becoming part of the reflections. The traveler continued, their heart quiet and full. Eventually they came upon a small clearing surrounded by standing stones. At its center sat a pool, not water, but light pulled into a shape that rippled slowly with presence. They knelt beside it, and as they leaned close, they saw faces there, not exact, not clear, but felt. The woman who once waited in the rain. The friend who had laughed so softly it could still be heard. A child's gaze filled with wonder. All of them shimmered and turned, not to disappear, but to return to wherever it was they belonged. The traveler dipped their fingers into the pool. It was neither cold nor warm, only familiar. And when they lifted their hand, the droplets clinging to their skin held the weight of kindness. They pressed one to their forehead and another to their heart. A breeze moved through the clearing then, carrying the scent of lavender and something like distant piano keys. The stones around them hummed faintly, not in song, but in understanding. The traveler stood again, and the path resumed. As they walked, a structure came into view ahead, a gate formed from woven branches, floating midair, unconnected to ground or post. Beneath it, the air shimmered like rising heat, though the day was cool. The traveler stepped through. On the other side, the world softened further. Colors deepened into quieter shades. Sounds took on the texture of memory. Trees bent into archways, and sky curved gently downward like a ceiling painted in motion. Here, everything was fluid. Here, everything had already happened and was still unfolding. The traveler let themselves dissolve into this rhythm, not vanish, but become part of the dream that stretched on, gentle and wide, with no need for endings. They left the plaza in silence, their steps now slower, more fluid, as though they were beginning to move with the rhythm of the place. The girl led them along a path lined with lanterns that floated slightly above the ground, flickering with soft amber light. The path wound gently through a field of tall grasses that swayed in waves, though there was no breeze. Each blade shimmered slightly, bending and rising in time with the traveler's breath. "The field is listening to you," the girl whispered, glancing back. "It listens to everyone. It remembers the footsteps, even after they're gone." They reached the edge of the field, where the ground sloped downward into a shallow valley filled with soft white mist. The girl paused. "Down there is where the lake sleeps." The traveler looked at her, eyes quiet. She continued, "It doesn't always rest. Sometimes it watches. Sometimes it dreams. But here, in the valley, it lets itself be still." They descended the slope together, the mist parting gently around them, cool and thick like velvet. At the center of the valley was a pool, perfectly still and opaque, its surface milky with soft light. Around it stood stones carved with spirals, arranged in a wide ring like sentinels. Each stone pulsed slowly with a rhythm that seemed to echo from beneath the surface of the lake itself. The girl knelt beside one of the stones and placed her hand on it. The pulsing slowed, then matched her breath. The traveler knelt beside another, mimicking her movement. When their palm touched the stone, a sound resonated, a hum that wasn't quite heard but felt. It vibrated gently through their bones, low and kind. The surface of the pool shimmered, and a soft voice emerged, not the girl's, not the traveler's, but something older, something vast. It spoke not in words but in emotions, layered like waves. "Welcome," it said, though not with a sound. "You are known. You are safe. You are not heavy here." The traveler closed their eyes. Images came like petals, a moon reflected in puddles, the feel of silk slipping through fingers, the hush of a candle going out, the weight of being held. The mist curled around them, warm now, wrapping them like a blanket woven from every kind memory that had ever been. The stones around the pool began to glow more brightly, not in brilliance, but in warmth. A comfort that asked for nothing. The voice of the lake spoke again, softer this time. You have always belonged. Even before you arrived. Even after you leave. The traveler felt their chest rise and fall with a peace deeper than sleep. They were not dreaming. Or perhaps they were dreaming in the truest sense, not an escape from waking, but a return to something more real than thought. The girl remained beside them, eyes closed, her hand still resting on the stone. The two of them sat in stillness, and the pool, the stones, the mist, all breathed with them. Time ceased its slow drift. There was only this quiet knowing, this gentle presence. The lake slept, and in its sleep, it held them both, like a lullaby holding its last note just a little longer before fading into silence. Eventually, the mist began to lift, not hurriedly, but with the grace of a curtain drawn back by a patient hand. The stones dimmed once more, their hum fading into the deeper hush of the valley. The girl opened her eyes and looked to the traveler, who rose slowly, still wrapped in the weightless warmth that lingered around their shoulders like the memory of a gentle embrace. "You've listened well," she said. "That's all the lake ever asks." They climbed back up the slope together, the grasses at the edge of the field bowing as they passed, as if acknowledging their return. The town waited for them like an old friend, unchanged, unhurried. The traveler began to notice more now. Little things. A rocking chair slowly swaying on a porch, though no one sat in it. A bird made of folded paper resting in the branches of a tree. A window glowing with candlelight that flickered in rhythm with their own breath. "Many who come here forget the shape of their worries," the girl said softly as they walked. "Not because they are erased, but because they lose their sharpness. Like stones in a river, they soften." They came to a bridge arching over a narrow stream that wound through the town like a ribbon. Beneath the surface, instead of water, dreams flowed, not in scenes or visions, but in colors, textures, sensations. The traveler leaned over the edge and saw soft plumes of lavender and silver drifting beneath the arch, twirling like dancers, vanishing into the distance. They crossed the bridge, each step echoed by the gentle tone of a bell far below. On the other side stood a garden, or what seemed to be one, though it grew no ordinary flowers. Instead, the garden bloomed with shapes and memories, each plant bearing something intangible, the scent of a familiar voice, the shade of an old laugh, the rustle of pages turned in childhood. "This is where the lake lets things grow," the girl said. "It doesn't decide what becomes a seed. It only waits for you to plant what you're ready to let bloom." The traveler walked among the shapes, each one stirring something soft and half-remembered. They reached out to a blossom shaped like a teardrop, and the moment their fingers brushed it, they felt the sensation of a single night, rain on a rooftop, the warmth of a mug held in quiet hands, the hush of a song played for no one. They didn't cry, but they felt the echo of what tears feel like, when they fall without pain. The girl knelt beside an empty patch of soil. "You can leave something here, if you wish," she said. "It doesn't have to be whole. It only needs to be real." The traveler knelt beside her. They reached deep into the stillness inside themselves and drew out a thought, a quiet longing, a softness unspoken, something that had waited a long time to be noticed. They placed it gently into the earth, and the ground accepted it with a glow. No sound. No fanfare. Just presence. A promise that it would be cared for. The girl stood again, brushing mist from her dress. "It will grow, in its time," she said. "Everything does here, eventually." They wandered deeper into the garden, where the air felt thicker with memory. Not heavy, never heavy here, but full, like a room holding its breath before a lullaby. A path of smooth stones led them beneath arches of hanging moss that shimmered faintly, each thread humming with something unspoken. At the end of the path stood a tall mirror, framed in driftwood and vines. The glass didn't reflect what was in front of it. Instead, it showed a version of the traveler not yet lived, standing in a quiet field, face turned to the wind, eyes full of peace. The traveler reached toward the glass, but the reflection did not mimic them. Instead, it smiled softly and closed its eyes. The traveler felt something unlock inside them. A stillness they hadn't known they were waiting for. The girl spoke from behind. "The lake doesn't just hold what has been. It remembers what might be." She stepped beside them. "And sometimes it shows you the version of yourself that's already resting, just waiting to be joined." They stood together, watching the reflection fade into a blur of light. Beyond the mirror, a low hill rolled gently upward, crowned by a single tree with golden leaves. They climbed slowly, the ground soft beneath their feet, the wind a whisper brushing past their ears. At the top of the hill, the world seemed to pause again. The town lay spread below them like a dream still unfolding, rooftops glimmering faintly under the hush of the lake above. The tree beside them gave off a faint warmth, its trunk wide and smooth, bark etched with spirals and crescent moons. The girl placed her hand against it. "This is where I stay," she said quietly. "I am part of the lake, just as you are. But I live here." The traveler looked at her, and for the first time noticed a faint glow to her outline, as if the lake itself had shaped her from mist and memory. "You're not alone," she added gently, as if answering a question they hadn't asked aloud. "No one who comes here is ever alone. Even when they leave." The traveler sat beneath the tree, back against the trunk, eyes drifting over the landscape of soft lights and slow-moving clouds beneath the surface above. The tree hummed faintly, a lullaby without words. "You don't have to stay," the girl said. "But you can, for as long as you like. The lake has no clocks. It only has moments." The traveler closed their eyes. The air was full of warmth and silence and light. In the distance, the faint sound of chimes rose and fell like a tide. It could have been hours, or minutes, or days. Time meant nothing here. Only the breath. Only the pause. Only the soft awareness of being held by something vast and gentle. The traveler opened their eyes again. The girl was seated a little ways off, watching the slow drift of clouds above the lake's mirrored ceiling. She smiled. "You're almost ready," she said. "You've seen what needed seeing. You've left what needed letting go." The traveler nodded slowly, though no words passed between them. Their chest was full of warmth now, a deep, steady calm that had nothing to prove and nowhere to rush. The lake, the town, the girl, the sky, all felt like different ways of saying the same thing. Rest. Remember. You are safe. The traveler stood once more beneath the golden tree. The leaves rustled with a sound like distant laughter softened by time. Below, the town continued its quiet rhythm, not frozen, but eternal in its stillness, like a song playing softly in another room. The girl rose beside them, brushing invisible dust from her hands, though nothing in this place ever gathered dust. "There's one more place," she said, "before you decide whether to stay, or to carry this piece back with you." They followed a narrow trail that spiraled slowly down the far side of the hill. The path was bordered with stones that pulsed gently, each step echoing like a heartbeat through the soles of their feet. With every curve of the trail, the mist grew thicker, then thinner, like breathing. At the base of the hill was a wide lake within the lake. A second pool, smaller, its edges lined with silver grass and stones carved into smooth, crescent shapes. The surface of the pool rippled slowly, but not from wind or movement. It rippled with reflection, not of sky, but of memory. The traveler peered in and saw themselves walking, speaking, laughing, sleeping. Not in clarity, but in essence. They saw the weight they had carried, the tenderness they had given, the longing they had tucked away inside themselves like folded paper. They knelt at the edge. The girl did not speak. The pool shimmered, and the reflection began to shift. Not into something else, but into a kind of soft truth. The traveler saw what they had forgotten to love in themselves. The gentle parts. The quiet strength. The resilience hidden in small choices and ordinary days. The pool offered no judgment, only witnessing. It saw, and it reflected, and it let go. The traveler touched the surface, and it parted like breath. For a moment, they felt the entire lake move with them, like a great animal breathing in unison. Then stillness returned. The girl placed a hand on the traveler's shoulder. "This is the moment," she said. "If you wish to stay, the house beneath the lake will be yours again. If you wish to leave, you will rise gently, and the water will return you. Either way, nothing will be taken from you. The lake keeps everything safe." The traveler looked up at her. There was no urgency in her voice. No consequence. Only care. The decision was not about leaving or remaining. It was about carrying the stillness, or living inside it. They stood. The pool had calmed again, its surface now reflecting only the sky, pale and soft, endless in its quiet. "You're ready," the girl whispered. "You've always been." The traveler closed their eyes. For a moment, they simply stood there, listening, not to sounds, but to silence itself. And then, with no more effort than exhaling, they stepped forward, back onto the spiral path, their body lighter, their breath deeper. They didn't know which direction they had chosen. It didn't matter. The lake would carry them. Upward or inward. home either way. The path led them once more through the town, though now everything shimmered with a new kind of light. It wasn't brighter, just more known. The traveler could feel the presence of each place they passed, as if the buildings and stones were whispering soft farewells or gentle welcomes. The bakery window still glowed, the scent of warm bread now filled with something sweeter, more restful. The cat on the windowsill stretched and yawned, then blinked slowly, eyes reflecting starlight. The alley of mirrors flickered again, but this time the reflections were quiet, not tugging, only waving faintly like memories at peace. The traveler passed the house that had been theirs, and its door creaked open once more. Inside, the teacup still steamed. The fire still glowed. A quilt had folded itself neatly beside the hearth. But the traveler only paused, smiled, and continued on. There was nothing left to carry. Only everything to keep. The girl walked beside them in silence, her expression soft and steady. She didn't lead now. She simply accompanied. At the edge of town, where the buildings faded into gardens and the paths turned to mist, a quiet arch stood, woven from willow branches and strands of soft light. It shimmered, not like water, but like the edge of waking. "This is the crossing," the girl said gently. "Whether you return to the surface, or remain here a little longer, you'll pass through this. The lake will carry you the rest of the way." The traveler looked at the arch, then back at her. She smiled. "You'll remember, even if you don't remember remembering. The calm will stay with you." She reached out and took their hand. For a long moment, they stood there together. And in that silence was everything: kindness, softness, trust. Then she let go. The traveler stepped through the arch. The world folded again, slow and tender, like a curtain being drawn closed at the end of a gentle play. Light spiraled around them, not bright, but soft. The kind of light you feel on closed eyelids in the morning before you open your eyes. They rose, or drifted, or dissolved upward through the lake's mirrored sky. And as they did, they heard the lake's voice one last time. Not a word. Not a sound. Just a presence, saying, "You are known. You are safe. You may rest now." The surface broke not with sound, but with silence. A hush that wrapped around them like a blanket. The air was cool again. The sky above pale with morning. They stood once more at the edge of the lake, the water calm and still, as if it had never moved. The trees around them swayed gently, and somewhere a bird called softly. The symbol on the stone was still there, warm to the touch. The traveler sat for a while, watching the lake, feeling its memory press gently into their chest like a lullaby. And though the town beneath the surface was no longer visible, its presence remained. Not below. Not elsewhere. But within. They stood and began to walk, slowly, quietly, with steps that no longer hurried. The world around them felt softer now. Like it had exhaled. Like it had remembered them. Like it was dreaming with them, just a little longer. The lake was not marked on any map. It did not shimmer with the brilliance of alpine waters, nor roar with the tides of oceans. Instead, it simply existed, a still, glassy sheet of blue nestled in the folds of a forgotten valley, where the air hummed like a lullaby and the breeze carried the scent of soft rain long past. The traveler found it not by intention, but by a gentle series of wrong turns that began to feel more like right ones the farther they wandered. The path had narrowed into grasses and moss, then into nothing at all, and yet their feet kept moving, guided not by direction but by the faint pull of something familiar. When the trees finally parted, and the lake came into view, it was as though time took a long breath and exhaled slowly, surrendering to the stillness. The water was impossibly calm. Not a ripple, not a glint of movement. The clouds above appeared perfectly mirrored on the surface, as if the sky had quietly folded itself in two and tucked a version of itself beneath the earth. The traveler stepped closer. The air cooled, touched by a strange dampness that clung not only to skin but to memory. There was something buried in that air, a scent like candle wax and stone, old tea, and wet wood, the kind of scent that didn't just belong to a place, but to the lives once lived inside it. As they knelt at the edge, peering into the silent lake, a shape began to form beneath the surface. At first it was only suggestion, a shadow against deeper shadow, a vague outline of something sunken. But the longer they looked, the clearer it became. A roof. Then windows. Then chimneys. There, below the still water, was a town. Perfectly intact. Perfectly quiet. Nestled beneath the surface as though it had always belonged there, cradled gently by the lake like a secret too soft to be spoken. The traveler blinked, and the reflection shimmered faintly, like the ghost of a dream just before waking. Something stirred. A ripple. A sound, almost too soft to be sound at all, a faint hum, deep and low, like a chord being plucked on a cello hidden far beneath the earth. It vibrated in their ribs more than their ears. The traveler leaned in. A stone near the shore gleamed slightly, marked with a symbol they didn't recognize. A spiral inside a circle, not carved but grown, as if the lake had pressed its own fingerprint into the rock over centuries. Without quite knowing why, they reached out to touch it. The moment their fingers brushed the stone, the lake breathed in. The surface pulled inward gently, spiraling like silk in a drain, and the traveler felt their body grow light, not weightless, but softened, like fog peeling away from a hill at dawn. Then, without resistance, they were drawn forward, not with force, but invitation. The world folded, quietly and slowly, around them. The surface of the lake did not break or splash. It simply opened. Water cradled them, cool and dense and quiet. Their breath slowed. Their thoughts untangled. The lake accepted them without question, pulling them through its mirrored sky and into something deeper. Down they went, past curtains of light and shadow, through warmth that did not burn and cold that did not bite. The town below rose to meet them. Roofs of mossy stone, windows glowing faintly with golden light, chimneys exhaling gentle spirals of mist. Streets paved in river stones, doorways framed by arches of shell and pearl. The traveler felt their feet touch soft ground. The traveler stood slowly, expecting resistance or the weight of water, but there was none. The lake around them shimmered like mist, not quite air, not quite liquid. It parted gently with each movement, like drifting through a dream. Above, the lake's surface had become a ceiling of silver light, soft and distant, as though the sky itself had turned upside down. The town around them was still and peaceful. Lanterns hung from curved iron poles, glowing with a light that pulsed faintly, like breathing. The houses leaned close to one another, built from stone and wood in quiet, natural curves, with roofs shaped like folded petals. Vines grew along the walls, their blossoms floating just above the surfaces, as if the weight of water kept them suspended in bloom. No one was visible, but the town did not feel abandoned. It felt paused, like a held breath, waiting only for the traveler's presence to begin again. The traveler walked slowly, their footsteps making no sound. The streets curved gently, never quite straight, winding past courtyards of glistening ferns and fountains that poured upward instead of down. From somewhere nearby, a soft melody floated through the stillness, a piano, perhaps, or a music box left open beneath the sea. The traveler turned a corner and saw a small figure sitting at the edge of a circular pool, their legs swinging gently. It was a girl, her hair drifting like silk in the water's softness, her dress shimmering like moonlight. She looked up and smiled, as if she had known the traveler would come. "You made it," she said softly, her voice as quiet as a ripple. "We've been waiting." The traveler opened their mouth, but no sound came. The girl didn't seem to mind. She patted the stone beside her, inviting them to sit. "Most people never find the way," she continued, gazing into the pool. "They get close, but they turn back. Too much noise in their minds. Too much weight in their steps." The traveler sat beside her. The pool before them held not water, but light. Gentle beams drifted in slow spirals, forming shapes that shimmered and dissolved, a bird in flight, a spinning top, a house with smoke curling from its chimney. "This is where forgotten thoughts go," the girl whispered. "Not lost ones. Just the ones no longer needed. The quiet ones." She dipped her fingers into the light, and the shapes rippled and reformed. "You brought some of your own," she added. "Would you like to leave them here?" The traveler felt a warmth in their chest. Something uncoiled. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. They reached out and placed their hand gently in the pool. A wave of calm spread through them, deep and slow and still. Images surfaced, moments not of sorrow, but of weight. Worries. Expectations. Names spoken long ago. And then they faded, not erased, but folded softly into the light, like pages set gently back onto a shelf. The girl smiled again. "They'll be safe here. Everything is safe here." She stood and held out her hand. "Come on. There's more to see." The traveler took it. Her hand was cool and steady, like holding a piece of night sky. Together, they walked deeper into the town, past glowing bridges and doorways shaped like teardrops. Somewhere, a clock chimed, but the sound was soft and slow, like a bell wrapped in velvet. Time moved differently here. Or maybe it didn't move at all. Maybe it simply hummed. They passed a bakery where the scent of warm bread drifted out through round windows, though no fire burned and no baker could be seen. A cat sat on the sill, its fur rippling like silk in slow motion, watching them with half-lidded eyes. It blinked once, lazily, as though approving their presence. The girl led the traveler along a winding path bordered with stones that glowed faintly with soft blue light. Flowers grew along the edges, blooming in slow pulses, opening and closing in rhythm with something deeper than breath. "The houses here are still alive," the girl said quietly. "They listen. They dream." She stopped in front of one, a small round cottage with a door shaped like a leaf, windows like sleepy eyes. "This one was yours, once," she added. The traveler tilted their head, confused but not surprised. The cottage did feel familiar, in a way that went beyond memory. It felt like a thought they'd had while half asleep, like something that had been waiting patiently to be remembered. The door opened gently as they approached, without sound or effort. Inside, the cottage was warm and dimly lit, filled with the scent of lavender and old books. The walls were curved, made of soft stone and wood that shimmered faintly, like bark beneath moonlight. Cushions and blankets were scattered across the floor, and a small fireplace flickered without flame. Just light and warmth, dancing softly. On the table sat a teacup, still steaming. "It's always been ready for you," the girl said. She didn't enter, only watched from the doorway. "You can stay, if you want. Or you can keep walking." The traveler stepped inside, letting their fingers trail along the curved wall. The air here felt like a memory wrapped in a sigh. A painting hung near the hearth, not of a place but of a feeling. Soft light on quiet water, the hush of dusk, the weightless drift of a slow thought. They sat on the floor beside the fire, and for a while, time became nothing. Just warmth. Just presence. Just breath. When they finally stood, they felt lighter than before. Not emptied, but softened. As if some part of them had finally remembered how to rest. The girl was still waiting outside, smiling. "You chose to keep walking," she said, as if it meant something. They continued together, through archways carved with spirals and symbols, past trees that whispered in voices not quite words. One tree opened as they approached, its bark unfolding like petals, revealing a room within. Inside were shelves filled with jars, some glowing, some dim. "Dreams," the girl said, stepping inside. "These are dreams people forgot to finish. We keep them here, just in case they return." The traveler ran their fingers along the nearest shelf. Each jar felt like a breath about to be taken. Some were warm. Some cool. One pulsed gently, as though remembering the rhythm of a heart. The girl touched one gently, and the jar filled with soft color, a boy flying above clouds made of feathers, holding a lantern shaped like a question mark. "This one's waiting," she said. "Maybe it was yours." The traveler felt something stir in their chest again. Not memory. Something quieter, They left the treehouse of dreams and followed a stone path downward, toward the heart of the town, where the buildings clustered closer and the air grew even softer. Ahead, a quiet dome shimmered like a bubble balanced atop the cobblestones, its surface reflecting everything around it in slow, dreamlike motion. The girl pointed. "That's where the lake listens." They approached the dome together. Its surface shimmered like the skin of a bubble, reflecting the town not just as it was, but as it might have been, different colors, slightly altered shapes, windows showing other times of day, seasons folding in and out of one another like the turning of a page inside a dream. The traveler reached out, and the dome responded, parting at their touch like mist. Inside, the light dimmed to a pale, humming blue. The space was circular and quiet. At its center stood a single chair made of smooth stone, and before it, a low basin filled not with water, but with slow-turning silver fog. The girl remained at the entrance. "This is where the lake keeps its memories," she said softly. "It listens to every footstep, every sigh. Everything you thought was forgotten, it remembers, gently." The traveler stepped into the center, drawn toward the basin. The fog inside moved like breath, shifting into shapes that weren't quite images. Echoes of voices, silhouettes of feelings, soft traces of emotion left behind like footprints in morning dew. They sat in the stone chair, and at once the fog grew still. Then, slowly, a scene unfolded, not like a picture, but like a sensation. A walk beneath autumn trees. A hand held, warm and familiar. The feeling of letting go. Not sadness. Not regret. Just the softness of something ending, like the final note of a lullaby. Another scene followed. Lying in a patch of sunlight, eyelids fluttering between wake and sleep, the low murmur of bees and distant flowers. Then a storm, not frightening, but enveloping, thunder like a drumbeat far away, rain pattering gently against a window pane. Each moment was not remembered with clarity, but with feeling. The lake did not show things exactly as they had been. It showed how they had felt, smoothed and softened, like stones worn down by centuries of tide. The traveler sat with these memories, not clinging to them, only letting them pass like clouds. The fog eventually dimmed again, growing quiet. They stood, and the dome opened once more. Outside, the girl waited patiently, as if no time had passed at all. "You listened," she said, pleased. "Most people try to speak. But the lake only answers when you're silent." They walked on. The town stretched farther than it had first seemed, the streets folding gently into new corners, each one quieter than the last. In one courtyard, chairs sat around a table that held no food, only pebbles arranged into strange, spiraling patterns. In another, wind chimes hung from invisible threads, ringing without breeze, each note as soft as a blink. They came to a small library nestled between two gently leaning buildings. Its door was open, and inside, the walls were lined with books that hummed quietly. "These aren't for reading," the girl said as the traveler ran their hand along the spines. "They're for remembering. Each one holds a single thought that was almost lost." She pulled one from the shelf and opened it. No words. just warmth. The traveler felt the sensation of lying beneath a heavy quilt in winter, the distant scent of cinnamon, the echo of a lullaby sung in a language they had never learned but somehow understood. She handed the book to them. "You can keep that one," she said. "Some thoughts are meant to come back." They carried the silent book close to their chest as they stepped out of the library. The girl walked ahead now, her hair floating gently as though moved by a current only she could feel. They passed a staircase that wound upward into nothing, its steps vanishing into the hazy sky above. No handrail, no support, just stone steps climbing through mist. "That one leads to forgotten mornings," the girl said without turning. "But we don't need to go there today." Instead, they turned toward a narrow alley that curved like a question mark. The walls on either side shimmered faintly, embedded with shells and bits of broken mirrors. The reflections flickered as they walked past, showing versions of themselves slightly different, older, younger, smiling, resting, vanishing. At the end of the alley was a door made of paper, thin and pale, held together by strands of golden thread. It opened without sound, revealing a chamber filled with hanging lights, tiny orbs drifting freely in the still air, pulsing with soft glows of lavender, seafoam green, pale rose. "These are pieces of unfinished thoughts," the girl whispered. Every time someone almost said something kind, almost forgave, almost reached out, the lake caught it. The traveler watched the lights float and twirl, a quiet dance of things unsaid but never lost. One drifted close and hovered near their shoulder, warm and calm. It felt like the weight of someone's hand just before they placed it gently on yours. The traveler closed their eyes, and the light nestled beside them for a moment before rising again. They stood there in stillness, surrounded by the soft glow of near forgiveness, of words that never made it into air but were still remembered. The room did not feel empty. It felt full of patience. When they stepped back outside, the light seemed to follow them briefly, before returning to its slow dance. The sky above the town began to shift, not darkening, not growing brighter, but curling inward as if preparing to rest. The traveler realized they did not know how long they had been here, but it didn't matter. There was no time in this place, only moments. And the moments folded together like petals at dusk. They came to a wide-open plaza where the ground was made of soft sand, warm beneath their feet. In the center stood a tree with silver leaves and roots that shimmered with blue veins of light. Beneath it sat a figure carved from stone, cross-legged, eyes closed. The girl approached it reverently. "This is the one who dreamed the lake," she said. "Or perhaps the lake dreamed them. No one knows anymore." The statue radiated calm. Around its base, small offerings had been placed, smooth stones, feathers, folded paper cranes, cups filled with silence. The traveler added the book they had been given, placing it gently beside the others. The moment it touched the ground, it glowed faintly and then faded into the earth like a sigh. "The lake keeps everything safe," the girl said softly. "Even what you didn't know you needed." The traveler felt something shift inside them, not a change, but a return. A remembering. Not of a place or a time, but of a state of being. Of quiet. of ease, of simply existing. The statue did not move, but the traveler felt it acknowledge them, as if nodding in a language deeper than gesture. They stood there together, beneath the silver leaves, letting the soft light brush across their skin like a lullaby.